Greetings, travelers. It's been a while, eh? Some of you might wonder, who is this guy? When did I subscribe to him? Why would I care about his response to comments on his Anti-Kefka videos that I've forgotten, or more likely, never even seen? To answer all of those questions most philosophically, I don't know. But since I've only uploaded my more musical creations in recent times, I thought it might be fun to make a video like this. I shall now address some objections to the arguments I made in my Anti-Kefka videos, acknowledge some mistakes in those videos, and I will also double down on things I believe I got right in my Kefka critiques. Before I begin, I wish to thank all those who have watched my videos and left comments on them. Let us now analyze what some of you have said in defense of Kefka and in defiance of my argumentative position, starting with my roguelike video. The first comment comes from YouTube user Ethan the Dark King, who left a whole bunch of comments, and it reads so. I disagree. It wouldn't make sense for Kefka to make completely logical arguments, especially since he's mentally effed in the head. All his actions are clever. Sure, maybe not clever towards nihilism, this is just an interpretation after all. But I don't think he's a nihilist, at least not by the normal definition. I see him more as someone who loves chaos and destruction even though he knows it's wrong, because he can't find any other purpose in his life. Kefka is a smart person, he's really great at manipulating and makes people fear him with his power. I don't think he's perfect, but I think he's a good villain for Final Fantasy VI and is a contrast to the main cast of Final Fantasy VI, who have people they care or cared about and keep on going, even when they lose everything. Moreover, why does Kefka have to be a nihilist? The writers never stated this at all. Hell, they more implied he's an insane genius, if anything. Thank you for the comment, Ethan. First, I like your point about Kefka being a contrast to the good guys of Final Fantasy VI. That is also one reason I think we can consider Kefka an antagonist that works with the game's story, even if I think his writing is poor overall. Contrast is often necessary for a work of art to be engaging, and I too would compliment FF6 and Kefka for doing this well. As to your question, why does Kefka have to be a nihilist? He doesn't. It's just that Kefka's claims about the meaninglessness of life, hope and dreams line up pretty well with what we consider a nihilistic worldview. For example, the two central concepts that one derives from the so-called Nietzschean crisis of nihilism are the destruction of higher values and the opposition to the affirmation of life. I can't imagine a more nihilistic statement of mockery than, "You sound like chapters from a self-help booklet," which is Kefka's response after the protagonists affirm their love for life, their friends and family. Also, remember that my video was a direct response to Broguelike's video, in which Broguelike called Kefka both a psychopath and a nihilist. In responding to Broguelike's praise of Kefka, I would have needed to bring up nihilism, even if Kefka wasn't actually nihilistic, which he, in my opinion, clearly was. The second comment comes from YouTube user Lord Quaz, who left a lengthy, well-written defense of Kefka under my video that I truly appreciate. The first counterpoint to my video from Lord Quaz reads so. Kefka being stupid or incompetent? Well, that's not true. Kefka goes to Edgar at the beginning of the game because of his own suspicion that he is housing Terra, and that he might be a traitor to the Empire. When his suspicions are proven true, he tries to burn down Figaro Castle. This shows how impulsive he can be and how he is willing to use underhanded tactics to get what he wants. The reason why he fails there is because of an unpredictable element being introduced. Thank you for the comment, Lord Quaz. First, I don't think Kefka goes to Figaro Castle on his own accord. The dialogue before the famous "There's sand on my boots" line, after all, reads, "Emperor Gestal's stupid orders, these recon jobs are the pits." Even if Gestal only gave the order to find Terra and left no further instructions, I don't think it makes Kefka intelligent that he goes to Figaro to search for Terra. After all, Figaro is the town nearest to Narsh, and Terra was sent on a mission to Narsh. Figaro Castle is the second most logical place to look for Terra. Regarding how Kefka fails at Figaro Castle, I believe I also said that we may write such a turn of events off as Edgar being clever rather than Kefka being incompetent. So I emphasized that the bigger issue here was Kefka ordering his men to set the castle on fire while Terra was still inside. Without Edgar's ingenuity, Terra may have been burnt alive. I'd argue that in this case, Kefka's impulsiveness was inseparable from his incompetence. Kefka nearly killed Terra, the Empire's precious weapon and research specimen that Emperor Gestal had personally kidnapped. Therefore, I'd still say that FF6 introduces Kefka as a rather incompetent antagonist. Lord Quaz also writes, next is Doma, where he tricks Leo into leaving so that he can poison the water supply, so that the occupation can end. Again, it's smart. Cunning, not out of character for him, as he has already done this once before, and most importantly of all, successful. Even though Sabin, Cyan and Shadow do get information for the returners, Kefka was successfully able to take out all opposition with deadly efficiency. Next we see him at Narsh, where he doesn't lose because he's outsmarted, but because he's outmuscled. The heroes were just stronger than him and his forces at the time. I agree, the heroes don't outsmart Kefka in Narsh, they are simply more powerful than him and his army. Seeing how easily Terra and just 2 Magitech soldiers annihilated Narsh's defenses at the beginning of the game, this makes little sense to me, but that's not really important right now. Here's the thing. I believe that the mindless genocide at Doma and Kefka losing in Narsh are actually somewhat related, and it all goes back to Kefka being incompetent and indeed not very smart. Because Kefka exterminated all of Doma down to the last child, neither he nor the Gestalian Empire gained anything. They were now in control of an empty patch of land, the most essential natural resources of which were basically ruined. If Kefka wasn't an impatient, impulsive fool and allowed Leo to conquer Doma rather than destroy it, the Empire's forces could have conscripted surviving Doma citizens into their own army, and they also could have retrieved their own imprisoned soldiers. This would have enabled Kefka to take a bigger force to Narsh. Also, Kefka and the Empire might have encountered less resistance at Narsh if they didn't make the inhabitants of Narsh aware that the Empire's leading general was capable of dirty tactics, like killing every single man, woman and child at the Empire's previous target by poisoning a body of water. By putting Narsh and the returners in a fight or die situation, Kefka basically made sure that Narsh would never agree to surrender and would never trust Kefka or the Empire to play by the rules ever again. What Kefka did at Doma was not just a horrific war crime, it was also the point where the world finally united against the Empire and was ready to fight to the last man. Not a brilliant moment of competence by Kefka, in my eyes, quite the opposite. And now, to acknowledge the biggest mistake in all of my anti-Kefka videos. Lord Quaz writes, "Not only are Kefka and Griffith drastically different characters, they serve drastically different purposes. I don't understand why you brought this up, other than pointing that Griffith is better than Kefka, which is true." You got me. I don't even understand why I brought up Griffith myself anymore. This was a pretty weak move. I basically introduced a total red herring into my case against Kefka. I am sorry for that. It was a part of the video that added nothing interesting and wasted the viewer's time. I'm glad you agree Griffith is a better villain, even though it's likely near impossible to find anyone familiar with Berserk who doesn't think Griffith is a better villain than Kefka or any other Final Fantasy antagonist. Griffith is the greatest of all time, and it's a shame that we'll never see him get his comeuppance. Rest in peace, Kentaro Miura. And now, to look at some comments on my Kefka is not Machiavellian video. The first comment comes from Wind and Cloud and Shadow, and it reads so. "Why do you hate Kefka so much? Oh yeah, you must be a Sephiroth fanboy." Before I go any further or say anything else, it's important to inform all of you watching that Wind and Cloud and Shadow and I resolved our disagreement in a most gentlemanly fashion, as you can see for yourself if you go into the comment section and press view more replies. Regardless of his assertion, Wind and Cloud and Shadow is actually a cool dude, and I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation we had under his original comment. The reason I brought this comment up at all is because it's a very common response in the Final Fantasy fanbase. When someone criticizes Final Fantasy VII, a lot of fans immediately assume that the true motive behind the criticism is not to analyze FF7, but to hype up a different game in the series. Similarly, when one criticizes Kefka, fans of Kefka often assume that the true motive is to praise Sephiroth, or Kuja, or Golbez, etc. What I wish to say regarding this is that it does not matter. What matters is the criticism, or indeed is the praise, itself, given to a particular character or game, warranted? When I point out that Kefka's backstory is a tired old comic book cliché, the quality or truthfulness of that claim is not dependent on how much I hate or love any other villain in the franchise. My claim may be true, or false, or an exaggeration, but saying, "you just like X or Y villain more," gets us no closer to affirming or debunking my claim. I wish we didn't see such counter-arguments in Final Fantasy discussions at all. The next few comments come again from Ethan the Dark King, and he packs a lot into them, so I won't read them in their entirety, but I will summarize them, while showing the full comments on screen. Kefka is not smart. He is a psychopath with sharp intelligence, manipulating both his allies and enemies. In the second part of the game, he is as powerful as a god. He's a horrible person who kills many people and treats all people like garbage. Kefka is also insane and tries to burn down Figaro Castle just to find one girl, Terra. Kefka doesn't care about human life and enjoys causing suffering. He is a good villain in terms of his backstory, his abilities, and his character. The writers of Final Fantasy VI never claimed that Kefka had all-encompassing wisdom. The reason Gestahl keeps Kefka in power is that Kefka is his right-hand man. Gestahl was also ready to let Celes rejoin his crew, so why wouldn't he forgive Kefka for his mistakes and keep him in a position of power? Also, Kefka was never meant to be a Machiavellian villain. So, a lot to unpack in those comments, but allow me to start with Ethan's last statement. I agree, I don't think the writers of FF6 intended Kefka to be Machiavellian, and I never claimed they did. Matt S. made the claim that Kefka was Machiavellian in his article at digitallydownloaded.net, and it is not uncommon for fans who are not professional writers for gaming websites to make similar claims. The very first comment I received when I shared my video on Facebook all those months ago stated, both Kefka and Sephiroth are Machiavellian. Ethan, you and I agree that Kefka isn't Machiavellian, but since both fans and critics sometimes claim he is, it was appropriate for me to analyze Kefka by looking at what could actually be considered Machiavellian, especially since Matt S. had no problems claiming that a dead political philosopher, our friend Nicola, would have supported Kefka's vile actions. That's the whole point. Kefka is not Machiavellian, and when fans and critics alike claim that he is some kind of Machiavellian genius, they are almost objectively overrating the writing of FF6. The same happens when they claim Kefka was all-knowing or possessed knowledge that is unattainable to mere mortals. You are absolutely right that the writers of the game never claimed Kefka had all-encompassing wisdom. Matt S., the writer for Digitally Downloaded, made the claim and my video contained a response to that claim. Coming to your answer to why Gestahl even keeps Kefka around after Kefka's many failures, you said that Gestahl was also ready to forgive Celes. I think there are two ways to see this. Either option A, Gestahl was truly willing to accept Celes back into the Empire's ranks, or B, he simply wanted Celes to kill her friends, only then to betray Celes and toss her aside by killing or imprisoning her. Option B would be more in character for a ruthless tyrant like Gestahl, but that's just my personal feeling. We have no way to determine what Gestahl would have done if Celes betrayed the Returners. Here's my problem with option A. I just don't buy Gestahl being so incredibly forgiving. We're talking about a man that kidnapped a baby after killing her parents just to learn more about the power of the Espers. Gestahl appears to be a brutal psychopathic autocrat to me, not someone who constantly forgives those who fail him or betray him. To answer your question, why wouldn't Gestahl forgive Kefka if he forgave Celes? I don't think he would have done either. I think the writers filled the entire floating continent sequence with moments of inconsistent characterization in order to force the Kefka wins storyline. And coming to your first counterpoint, the one where you claim Kefka is an intelligent manipulator, but also how he's insane and sets Figaro Castle on fire just to get to Terra, well, again, I think you and many other commenters have made my point for me. Kefka is a walking contradiction only sustained in the plot by contrivances, such as Gestahl being a ruthless evil psychopath sometimes and a forgiving, almost fatherly person other times. The last comment I will respond to comes from YouTube user Trey Atkinson, and it reads so. I will agree, Kefka isn't Machiavellian, and a good character because of how he acts. His villainy isn't based in Machiavellian tones. Kefka is definitely a good example of what I consider an arc of humanity descending into monstrosity. He is stated to have been sane before the experimentation, but not decent. Kefka also thinks and acts as he does because the experiments broke his mind. He is fairly intelligent. This is shown by the way he twists and works the party into a position he wants before the destruction of the world, and the trick he plays against Leo to kill him. His theme is called Dancing Mad for a reason. We don't need a deep antagonist for a story to be good. He's a monster, not a villain. Morals aren't his worry. He killed hundreds with poison, pushed soldiers under him to march to death in order to try and weaken a few powerful enemies. I hope you don't think I'm a fanboy, but I do enjoy Kefka's madness and stopping it throughout FF6. Thank you for the comment, Trey. And worry not, I don't think you are a fanboy. I find words like fanboy or stan or hater, etc. have long since lost all meaning in online discussions. That you're defending a game and a character that you like in an intelligent and calm manner certainly doesn't make you a fanboy in the traditional sense. It just makes you someone who discusses video games and art online. So it makes you my favorite kind of person actually. I agree with a lot of what you're saying too. For example, I agree an antagonist doesn't need to have deep characterization if the story isn't about them. The Emperor from Star Wars didn't have a complex character or motivation, and that worked just fine because the story wasn't about him. It was about Luke, Han and Leia. And also Darth Vader. The story of Final Fantasy VI focuses on the heroes and not Kefka, so Kefka doesn't need to be a complex character. I must, however, disagree with your claim that Kefka's arc is a good example of how a human descends into becoming a monster. It's not that Kefka isn't a monster, he is. It's that the human and dissent parts are completely missing from that arc. Kefka starts out willing to kill everyone he can and ends the game attempting to destroy everything and everyone. That psychologically frightening moment where something inside him twists him and slowly corrupts him from decent to indecent or from good to evil is something that we never see, and it doesn't even exist in his backstory because he snapped because of an experiment. He may have been good or evil before that, but the game doesn't tell us. In conclusion, a lot of the objections raised to my Anti-Kefka videos in the comments were solid and well articulated. I also think that many criticisms of my arguments perhaps missed the part of my case where I wasn't criticizing Kefka specifically, but claims made about Kefka by fans and critics that wish to praise him. I want to thank everyone for watching, especially those who have left comments on my Kefka analysis videos. I know I don't upload as regularly as I ought to, but I truly cannot put into words how much I appreciate every single comment that I've had the chance to read, regardless of if the authors agree with me or think that I'm completely in the wrong. Please leave your further thoughts in the comment section on this video as well, if you have the time and desire to do so. Let me know if you'd like to see more videos on Final Fantasy games and characters. Perhaps I should change gears and make a video about something that I like about Final Fantasy VI. If so, let me know. May you always find great art to enjoy, and may you never run out of coffee and cookies.